Hi, I'm Matt Roberts, health and OCR coach. Welcome to the Obstacle Dominator podcast. We specialize in training new and upcoming OCR athletes to excel in both life and competition. If you're a racer looking to improve your running, enhance your obstacle efficiency, and learn how to fuel your body for peak performance, you've come to the right place. We'll cover everything from building confidence, physical ability, your physique, and owning nutrition and recovery techniques. Join us for our weekly podcast episodes where you'll discover the race strategies and tactics that we teach at successful team members that will also allow you to dominate the obstacles in your path.
How's that?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I think we're in business.
Happy days.
Shall we begin? How's things? How's your week going?
Yeah, week's going well. I don't know if you had the wind and the rain last night. It was torrentious.
Yeah, it was it's been a pretty terrible. I stayed in the van the past couple of nights as well. Fucking freezing. Yeah, and then I was like, I wonder what the temperature is, and it was only like 10 degrees. I was like, oh, it's not even cold yet, really. So
Did you not get your softie out?
No.
No.
I used to sleep nude in my sleeping bag, so we come under contact. It's a scare tactic, and also
Fucking jump out the blue.
yeah, and also a bit of a drawing fire for the rest of the platoon when you're running bollock naked from left to right out the harbour area.
Don't know whether to run or engage.
Just in shock.
Yeah.
I think it used to be a thing that, I don't know if it was the Celtic warriors, but they used to go into battle naked. Yeah, interesting tactic.
I mean, it is if you're diving into the prone position and you're straight onto an ant's nest. It's not going to be pretty, is it?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Cool. So, let's dive into today's topic. We're going to talk about training, quite broad in some senses, but also we'll narrow it down. But really, like, the topic is when is the best time of day to train? And it's a question I've come across quite frequently. And there are like certain times of the day which are better to train, but I think what it comes down to is what's practical for the individual, because we haven't all got the same commitments in life and responsibilities, so that can determine a lot, and that can also affect energy. So hopefully, by us having this conversation, Mitch, this will help people work out what works best for them in terms of time to train, but then also feeding into that is what types of session to do at that particular time of day, especially if people are doing more than one training session a day, sort of like evening, morning sessions, or even looking to balance out their week. So that's what we can go over. And I think a good place to speak from is like experience, like what worked for us previously, what has worked over the coming years, or over the past few years, and then also what we're adopting in terms of our training now, and then give some pointers from there.
Okay. So everyone is very different when it comes to training throughout the day. I've played around multiple times with routines on when to train and like the type of session that I'm doing, but also it depends what's on as well. I've found when it's a hard session, so like intervals or threshold training or VO2 max training, it's better to do it first thing in the morning, just because it's one of them where you are going to be pushing to 90 to 95%. It's one of those sessions where a lot of people can dread because you are pushing your body to an uncomfortable place. So if you get up, hit the track or hit the road, hit the trails, wherever you do your session, and get the hard session done straight away, that's then going to be more beneficial than saying you push it to the right. So say you do it midday or in the evening, you've had a long day at work, you're tired, you don't want to do much, and now you've got to psych yourself up and motivate yourself to go do a session where you're going to be pushing into an uncomfortable state. Now, most of us can be really motivated in the morning. You jump up out of bed, you're excited to start the day for the most part, and it's like, okay, let's get this done. Let's look after myself, and that's it. Around 2 o'clock, that's when it can start to hit you, depending on how you fueled yourself, and you end up just becoming, do I go do it? Do I not? And having that conversation with yourself to do a strength session, a grip session, it'd be a bit easier because you're working hard, but not to the most uncomfortable state that you would do hitting a VO2 max or a threshold session. So it
Yeah,
does come down to the session itself.
yeah, I agree. Like the session, yeah, the session can determine a hell of a lot based on when to train. Like I'm kind of almost at the opposite here as well because I get all of like your reasoning behind getting up, eating the biggest frog in the morning rather than waiting until later on in the day when life starts to get in the way, the weather starts to decline, the inner bitch comes into play and starts trying to talk you out of it. It's like get up, don't hesitate, go and tackle it, and that works like so well for many. I remember actually a period of time actually like when I was at ITC, like training recruits. That was what I would do because the days were so long. I'd have to get up at like maybe 4:35, eat, then get to the gym, train in the gym, then start my working day, and then have other fitness and other work commitments. So by the time it got to 6, 7 p.m. after over a 12-hour day, you're not really feeling motivation. So to then go and say, all right, go and train then, it just doesn't work. Levels of motivation, actual physical energy, mental energy to go and like take on a big session where you dig deep. So it's almost like what you're saying is prioritizing the biggest frog to eat first in the morning, go and tackle that, and then everything else realistically can become easier.
It's like to put it into like it doesn't always work though down to your routine. Like, and to give an example of that, yesterday I went out and did my long run. I had multiple things to do throughout the day. So it was like eat the biggest frog, like the training's important, long run's important, get it done first thing in the morning. Whether today I haven't been able to train first thing because I've had classes and then there's been work to do. So I'm doing my training after this podcast. So it's like, even though I'll hit that point where I'm like, don't want to do much. Like it's always that time of the day. It's always around the same time. It's like, I can go do that because I know, even though it's not a key session for myself, I know it still needs to be done. And then it's breaking my day down because already I've done quite a lot of work, which hasn't been for myself. It's been for others. So I'm at that point where I need to do something for me.
Yeah. And that's a good way to break up the day. I mean, we'll break it down, and I'll go into what I do now. But I do exactly the same. Like I know we do a lot around like sleep and circadian rhythm, and naturally there's dips of energy like mentally throughout the day. In particular, like you get that midday slump that everyone's familiar with. And part of that could be to do with how much sleep you get in. It could be to do with the time of year, the light. It could be to do with nutrition. Like if you've eaten a certain type of meal, lots of sugar, lots of carbs, then that could ultimately lead to having a bit of dip of energy. But we don't typically like fall into any of those traps. I certainly know that you don't, through coaching you. So it's like when peak productivity dips around sort of anywhere between like could be 11 through to about 2, 3 o'clock, there could be a dip. It's like, okay, well, how can I like essentially like hack my biology? And it's like, well, get up and move my body. I've probably been sedentary for a couple of hours. So then you throw in a training session, which you may not feel that motivated to do in that moment, but actually that helps peak everything in your body. And then you can get back to work in the later part of the afternoon as well. So it's really beneficial. And I think that's what we're going to get out with all of this is helping people gain more of an insight and an understanding of how to like use training, use nutrition at certain times of day to get like peak performance mentally and physically. And there will be an optimal for you. We're fortunate enough that we can construct our day around the work that we do and a lot of other things in life because of like the work we do. Like we, for the most part, remote work, and we don't really need to be in too many places unless there's events or races or whatever else. So we do have the freedom and flexibility, but we've constructed that. And also, I think something that changes, and this is something I was speaking to Josie about this morning, is like I don't know how much longer I can like get out and train in the evening for, because it was like, oh, it's light till 10, then it's now light until like 7:30. Give it another month, it's going to be like 4 or 5 o'clock before it's dark. Like we said at the start of the conversation as well, like it's it's not going to get any better, the weather. Like it's gonna continue to drop for the next few months, until we get into next year. So it's like, what do we do about this? How do we work around life, work, commitments to make sure that we do stay consistent into this off-season period? And I know a few people have still got some races left, but you've been into your off-season now, what, 8 weeks now?
Yeah,
About
looking going into like I think like the fifth or sixth week off season.
yeah, yeah, and already like you're performing incredibly well. So, um, okay, so a bit more on this as well. Like morning training, even like low intensity training. So Mitch has talked about high intensity training being something to get up and do. And the saying that we're saying is like eat the biggest frog. It basically means if you had to eat 2 frogs, eat the biggest frog first, because that's going to be the most uncomfortable. Then eating the second frog, which is a bit smaller, will be a little bit easier. Meaning everything later that day will become a little bit easier if you tackle the biggest, most problematic thing first. Yeah, and it's going to be hard because it's probably going to be dark. So looking at the environment that you choose to train, and we can go into like the mindset, the psychology of that a little bit more. But even for me, there's a big period of time, and even still now, in many cases, I will do my low intensity training in the morning, and that's kind of the the thought process of like ease into the day, ease out of the day, rather than kind of what a lot of people do is wake up, soul crushing workout, and then have a very stressful day, and then can have a late night, stressful evening, lots of digital stimulation after dark, and they're not really balancing that stress and rest appropriately, and then there's far too much stress, and that can be something that takes you away from making fitness gains, because you're not prioritizing your health. In actual fact, like you're doing the complete opposite. You're running yourself into the ground more.
Like what a lot of people are told though is they need to be destroying themselves in every session when that's not the case at all. Like if you trained in the morning, like you can, or say you work an 8 till 5 or a 9 till 5 and you only get an hour break, you could fit in a 30-minute walk just to break up the day. While yes, you're not going to make huge gains through that, but it's just helping your energy levels and productivity increase because you're just having a break from the stress that has been loaded onto the body mentally and physically from the work that you're doing. Like, because if you think about it, if you're sat at a desk most of the time, yeah, it may not be physical, but what it's going to be doing to your posture, you just sat there. Like right now, I'm sat here and I know you get too comfy, you sit in this position 2 to 3 hours, and it's like you start to become stiff, where the human body will be made to move mechanically, we're made to move around. So having something to break up that day will really benefit you and motivate you essentially. So if you do have a session in the evening, you can go do that or fit in the timing. And then don't spend 3 hours in the fucking gym. I'd say that's one thing not that I wouldn't recommend, because if you're destroying your body for 3 hours in the gym, like hitting it hard and then not nourishing your body with good quality nutrition, not getting sleep, the stress that's been put on the body, but also the nervous system, that's going to have a huge impact, and you're not going to recover the next day. You're just going to end up in a vicious cycle.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. because everything's like stress. And I was talking about this from the standpoint of like racing. I don't know if it was on the last podcast or I had some conversation. It's like, well, what what is more stressful on the body? Running a Spartan race really, really fast, really, really intense, or like just kind of bimbling around the course, going really, really slow. Like going really, really slow probably won't even tax you. Like if we were to walk around one, go across the obstacles, it wouldn't phase us. But then the other end of that spectrum, going as hard as possible, that's severely taxing. What people do is go moderately hard, so they're out there hours and hours and hours, and they're really, really taxing themselves. And that in itself can be harder. Like if you're on the course for 5, 6 hours in comparison to being out there for 2 to 3 hours, I would argue that the person that's been out there longer is under a lot more stress. So it's the same with like our training sessions. Um, I mean, we're talking specifically to OCR, like races. So you do need to put a decent amount of time into your training, but have a look at how much of that time is actually like productive, like useful time spent either in the gym or on your feet, like out running or doing other conditioning activities. Because we can waste a lot of time. Like I'm of like the mindset of get in, do the work, and get out. Like an example of that, I've done a strength training session on Thursday. My my warm up consisted of like 10 minutes of just like some working on knees, ankles, bit of balance work, just priming the body, some light lifting, some warm up sets. All right, so in 10 minutes, quite a lot, but just not messing around, like priming the body to exercise. And then 38 minutes later, I stopped my watch and I was like, oh, wow, I've done a full body session. So I deadlifted, I done box jumps, I done walking lunges, plyometric lunges, I squatted, I done more plyometrics, and then I done a full upper body session in there. And the way that I saved time was supersetting it. Yeah, so instead of going, oh, I need to take lengthy amounts of rest, like yeah, we do need rest to maximize performance if you're going for top end lifts. But is that really, really necessary for what we do? Like we want to be strong, but we don't want to take such rest periods where actually that's compromising the work that we're doing. Because we don't need to max out. If you think about it, Atlas Stone, sandbag, they're not super, super heavy. Like, so yeah, it's going to benefit us to become stronger, but we don't need to do it to the extent that we're in hours where we're like taking more like of a toll on the body, and that comes at more of a cost of how sore you are. Like do the bare minimum for maximum results and move on. So that's another consideration. And it doesn't always need to be like this perfect thing. I think having like optional sessions, A sessions, B sessions, like a full all-encompassing one, ticking all the boxes that you feel like you want and need, but then more of like a light composite version of that that's still going to keep you moving forward. And that could be a gym-based workout and then a home-based workout. One is with all the kit and equipment in the gym, and then the other one's when you're traveling with work and you're in a hotel room, and all you can do is some plyometrics or whatever else. But we'll go into like when to do intense cardio, low intensity cardio, as well as like strength work and even like combined sessions as well in a minute. You got anything else you want to add on that, Mitch?
Yeah, so like the sessions themselves like don't have to be complicated at all. They can be very simple. I'm a big fan of supersets. I always have done. I've always liked combining a weighted exercise and a body weight exercise because you can lift a lot of weight, but if you can't lift your body like yourself, then that's like a weakness that needs to be worked on, especially within OCR. Because if you can deadlift like say 150, 200 kilos, but then you can't pull yourself up the rope climb, like the rope climb would want to be, you want to focus more on movements that are going to benefit that. And to put it into perspective, like before my first ever Spartan race, we spent 9 months training, and all I did was body weight movements. Like my grip sessions, I remember going to the woods and finding trees to do the pull-ups and the hangs on them because I didn't have access to a pull-up bar. I then also used the shed as well, open the door and then just use the shed. Like I didn't have any fancy equipment. I didn't have nothing. I had to build from that, and it worked. It got me to where I needed to get to. And then obviously that's when you start investing and utilizing kit and going to the gym more. So if you're someone out there that doesn't know where to begin or doesn't have access to a lot of equipment, you don't need a lot of equipment. As long as you've got yourself, like, you'll be surprised the amount of work and the conditioning that you can do to set yourself up for races.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Entirely. It's about like utilizing what you do have on hand. And yeah, it's been phenomenal because I think you have used the gym, but using the gym and weights has been a more recent thing. But for the most part, it's been like super slow or like high intensity interval training, using body weight and very like natural, functional movements. But then, like you said, supersetting them so there's minimal rest. So it'd be like do 4 exercises on the bounce, then take a rest period of whatever that is, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, just to allow the body to kind of regenerate it and then go again. And it's like, well, I'm stacking all these exercises on top of each other, and then I'm taking a decent amount of rest, and then I'm going to go again, but then I'm going to cut it short before actually I do too much so that it doesn't impact tomorrow, the next day, any other training sessions that I have on the calendar, but then also structuring the week in such a way where, like, even if you have got training on the following days and you do accrue a little bit of soreness or fatigue, well, you can actively recover through those sessions so that when it comes to having to perform or do something high intensity again, you've actually got the energy to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what the body can actually do if you've got some structure and like support. And if you don't know what to do, like, research, ask people that do, because there'll be ways around.
Yeah, yeah. I think a big problem, I mean, just diving into like strength training in particular, and also talking about like strength with running. I feel like when I first started training, I was all about like physique. Like that was like the most important thing. It'd be like, oh, I've got to make sure that I've got this particular movement in there because I want to target like my chest or my biceps or something like that. Um, but they get hit regardless. Like if you do the big compound lifts, they're going to get hit to a certain degree. But where that was problematic was I was focusing too much on like the granular details rather than focus on the stuff that's really going to like move the needle. And also thinking that doing too much cardiovascular exercise would be detrimental to like muscle growth, physique goals. And equally now, like I think the complete opposite. So where I was like, oh, how much strength can I get in? I need to be stronger. Like I need to build muscle. But actually now, years down the line, it's like I'm doing less strength training than I ever have. And really prioritizing the things that will like boost fitness, move the needle, but in the healthiest possible way. And there is a way to like blend this in, and like the way that you train is slightly different to the way that I train and to the next person as well. And that feeds back into routine, responsibilities, yeah, people's lifestyles and really what the priority and focus is. Like for you, you want top end performance, like that's what you are like chasing down successfully. And it's still building that momentum through the consistency by not just making the smarter choices with training and understanding training. It's looking at the bigger picture of like the year plan, the 2 year plan, the 3 year plan, looking backwards and focusing on the progress over being like really, really perfect with all of this.
Yeah. It's amazing how, as you progress, things change, training changes. Like, I was so focused on physique, and at the moment, like, I wouldn't say like I'm in good shape. I wouldn't say my physique's the best, but I'm performing a lot better. So at the moment, I'm just testing and trialing like foods to see what's going to help me get the maximum output of each session and also how I'm feeling. Because there'll be days where I can like not eat as much. Like yesterday, I did my long run fasted. Now, a lot of people wouldn't even dare to think to go run 16 kilometers without eating anything. They'd want a full stomach before going, or at least something to eat. Whereas I know my body, I know I can go out, run 16 kilometers at a steady pace as well. So it wasn't hard hitting, it was zone two, like monitoring that heart rate, just enjoying the run. And I finished the run and I'd thought I'd be hungry and I wasn't. So it's about figuring out what works at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I think because you've done this a while, like you know your body and also you've trained your body and it's now like metabolically flexible. And what we mean by that is having the ability to tap into your stored energy, in particular, like your body fat as a very like energy dense source of energy that a lot of endurance athletes struggle to optimize. In fact, one of the guys that joined us a few months ago, been a runner for a long time, never seen his abs, and then lo and behold, sort of 6 to 8 weeks down the line, he's even more shredded, and can see that six pack, and is now performing better by doing less training, by optimizing his health, nutrition, by really understanding like meal timing, time of day to train, and then also like intensities and outputs that contain within that, as well as like the nutrition. And I think it really depends on the individual, because way back when, like fat loss and body composition was my goal. I didn't really care about the performance as such. Like I was fit enough, but I wanted to change my body composition. But then you got other people at the other end of it where they're really focusing on the performance, but then they can have a little bit of wear and tear with their body, like aches and pains, or maybe they're kind of like skinny fat due to the intensity of the training, the frequency of the training, the nutrition on top of that. But I think blending both of them together, both of those athletes would benefit from like optimizing their training, the intensities, and their nutrition, so that one, the guys that are wanting to change their body composition and build a little bit of muscle and burn a lot of fat, they would benefit from that because they are going to become lighter. But then equally, the elite runner that might be carrying an extra couple of pounds, they would also benefit from like shredding some body fat. And fundamentally, that comes back to like nutrition and stress management and sleep. But then also that comes down to like optimizing the training intensity. So I think a question for people listening, like what is a priority for you right now? Is it performance? Like, do you want to maximize performance, or do you really want to dial in like your body composition? Or with those completely aside, they may be like irrelevant. Maybe you're going through a bit of a health issue at the moment, or maybe like you're aware that if you don't make some changes, you can encounter some health issues. And I would argue, out of those, like health is a priority. I would like to say that we don't, and if we do put our health at risk with anything that we do, we're very conscious and very aware of it, and it will only be for a small amount of time, not a consistent amount of time, to reach the dizzy heights of top end performance immediately, having a long term point of view. So everyone benefit from prioritizing their health, then they're prioritizing the body composition, all right, because decent amount of muscle mass equates to a longer lifespan, as well as like doing particular training that promotes muscle mass, bone density, helps with lifespan and health. And equally, the guys that are looking to perform as well, if you want to perform maximum, don't just focus on the training and pushing more and more. Have a look at how you can become healthier. So actually you can bounce back from intense training sessions more, and look at how you can optimize like your sleep and recovery. And then actually that will feed into your output in your training sessions, which makes give you that little bit extra. So I think the goals really determine what we do with our training and when we do our training, as well as like availability, like to train based on responsibilities, work, and other commitments. I know we chatted about this on well, many times, like, and I posted about it recently, like the power to weight ratio. I think for a lot of like open runners, or not necessarily like novice or amateur, but people that don't race competitively within OCR or Spartan, they're just quite happy to have a little bit of a jolly round and whatever else. But with that being said, they do want to be able to run. I mean, you can speak about this from the guys that we've worked with or conversations you had. Everyone wants to make improvements, but it's how do we go about them? Like, do we go, well, I just want to get faster, and then all you do is focus on the training, when actually you've got 50 pounds of extra weight or 10 pounds of extra body fat that you could shift? That if you've done that alone, your power output would increase due to the weight ratio going down. And that's what I'd like to see a lot of open races do, like dial in your health, dial in your body composition, and that would allow you to progress and actually perform better on the course. Because if you think about monkey bars, if you're too heavy, you're going to fall off them. So it doesn't matter like how much of a good technique you've got. If you're carrying extra weight, then that's going to be strain on your grip, your arms, your back, whatever else, and that could risk injury. It was sort of horrific thing at Killington. A guy come off the multi-rig and just landed wrong, and his leg was like bent completely. And some of that comes down to body awareness as well. And like something we use for body awareness is like balance work and rope flow. And that's an absolute game changer because it's like the connection of the mind and body and like your awareness in space. And by improving that, that's going to improve everything. Yeah. Like it's going to make us like fitter and stronger for longer. Having a look at like elderly as well, like one of the biggest killers or one of the parts that contributes to elderly dying in later life is from falls, and it's not necessarily the falls that kill them. It will be the fall that puts them in hospital and then puts them in an environment where they can become sick. So it makes them more susceptible. I don't know if we mentioned it recently, but it's like the Peter Attia. I think I might have done it on a post. The Peter Attia story of like the Titanic. It's like if you could spot the iceberg far enough ahead, you could start turning and miss the iceberg. But if you keep focusing on performance and chasing that whilst neglecting your health, that iceberg's getting a little bit closer and the ability to turn is getting less and less. So it's like, what is really a priority for you as an individual right now? What do you need to be focusing on? And that's not to say that you forget everything else. Like it's like, think about lowest hanging fruit, biggest priority, what's going to move the needle the most, and then knock that down really, really quick, dial that in while simultaneously focusing on smaller like habits and routines and building consistency in the background. That's the thing that will take you the distance and make it a lot easier to become consistent through repetition and habit formation.
And then over the years, you'll notice they'll both combine health and performance. So eventually you can have them both. You can have that healthy life. You can be performing to a high standard, but you have to start somewhere. And it's all about seeing what's the biggest thing for yourself right now.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you want to like add on this before we kind of dive back into the routine and like best time of day to train?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Okay. I think one last thing I want to mention is you want to find balance between like everything we're talking about, the cardio and the strength training. I'm doing less strength training than I ever have, and that's because I'm pretty happy with the amount of muscle mass that I've got. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a little bit more, but what is the benefit of that? Is that going to actually impact my racing? So where I'm at right now, it'd actually work better for me to just ditch a little bit more body fat. Yeah, rather than like putting an extra strength training session in there, which would necessarily like build muscle if my nutrition was on point. And actually, I had a conversation with a guys on the team, and he was asking about putting an extra strength training session on. I said this and said, look, well, yeah, we could, but based on where you're at, is that really the thing that we need to be doing? And it was like, well, no, yeah, I get your point, but I kind of want it in there for feeling good. So there's also that as well. It's just like what's going to keep you consistent with your training. And it's not to say that you need to max out on both those sessions, but it's just being aware of what works for the individual, what do they enjoy doing, but then also what's going to be beneficial across the long term. Yeah, and we don't need 4 or 5 strength training sessions in there a week. You just don't. Like I do one structured strength training session a week at the moment, a little bit of grip here and there, and then I do like an OCR session. So there's definitely like strong signals being sent to my body on a weekly basis to cling on to the muscle that I've got. So yeah, minimal effective dose. And going back to the old analogy, what we said about the dumbbells, if you've been training for years and years and years, the ability to build muscle becomes harder and harder. Yeah, we try and cut corners all of the time, but actually through cutting corners might elevate you to success in the short term, but that may actually slow down your long-term progress and actually affect levels of motivation. Because if you hit a wall in the next 12 to 18 months and you're not seeing muscle being built anymore because you kind of maxed out all your strategies and tactics and kind of feeling a little bit lost, how's that going to affect your motivation when you're going into the gym every day for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and you're not seeing any gains? Yeah, it can be quite detrimental. So it's like the higher we rise, the thinner the oxygen gets. And what I mean by that is like the further down the line we get, the harder it becomes to actually make those gains. And we've spoke about like numerous stories about this, but was comparing the Olympians a while back on the podcast, and it's like they're working for a year to shave half a second off, maybe a second. Yeah, shaving a second off their run times each and every year. But a lot of us can determine our success by the last session, when in actual fact you are making progress. You're just not tracking the progress. And the more we track, the more we can improve if we analyze that data properly. But if the training's inadequate or wrong or too sporadic, and this is another big one, is people wanting a lot of different approaches, a lot of different sessions, just for levels of enjoyment. Actually, that can take away from it. I was looking at Jakob Ingebrigtsen, one of his sessions from when he was 12 years old to where he is now. I think he's 24 now, so 12 years. He's done the same session every week pretty much since he was a 12-year-old, and that was 800-meter intervals. And he started off, I think, doing like 8 or 10 intervals at that young age, or probably even yet less than that. But theoretically, he's added on 1 interval per year. Whereas a lot of people will be like, and I actually heard of this, that one of the local tracks, one of the local running clubs was getting people to do 24 reps of 800 meters. There's like 19 kilometers in one session. And these are like just standard club runners. That's not taking anything away from them, because I'm sure some of them could batter me on run times. But still, that's a lot of volume and that's a lot of intensity, depending on how that's done. But what people do is, going back to the analogy of the dumbbells, they go into the gym and they pick up the 40 kilos when actually they should start on the 2-kilo dumbbells. And exactly the same for the running. They'll go in and see, oh, Jakob Ingebrigtsen's doing 24 intervals of 800. I'm going to give that a crack. And then, yeah, strain every muscle in their body and then wonder why they're injured.
And then can't train for fucking 2 weeks because their body's just not used to it.
Yeah.
It's, you think with the training as well, it's like pushing the ego aside as well. Like using that double analogy, it is an ego thing. Like we'll look at other people around us and go, yeah, I can lift as heavy as him, or oh, I need to be lifting that to be like class says this, or I need to have this type of build. And it's not like you have to, whenever you're looking at your session, you've got to just tunnel vision and focus on that itself. Like one of my strength sessions at the moment, like we're doing single leg work just to help strengthen that knee and my ankle, just to prevent injuries in the future, because that's something that's came up over the past few years. And I've been humbled by the weight. Like I'm doing 20 kilos. I'm just using a barbell for fucking single leg work. Now doing it, I hate it because my ego's like, I'm weak as piss. But in reality, because I'm focusing on the form and slowly building, like in the next couple of weeks, I'll increase it by 5 to 10 kilos and I'll be able to do it safely and correctly without hurting myself. And then in a month's time, I'll be able to increase it again. But it's every session, and I hear it with people that go to the gym, people from boot camp. It's like, I need to be setting PBs. And it's like, you don't need to be setting a PB every session. All you need to do is show up and put in the work. Like, it doesn't matter whether you set a PB or whether the weight drops. Like, that doesn't matter. What matters is actually doing the work and going through the motion of each exercise, which is going to get you to that vision or that long-term goal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think it's down to a couple of things there. It's the expectation based on what we see online or what's expected of us. And that could be put onto us by ourselves, not just other people as well. And that could be from experiences, past events, but then also like comparison, like comparing ourselves to someone that we saw online, comparing ourselves to another athlete. And this weekend at the training weekend that we done on Saturday, we done tons and tons of theory. It was like really, really deep and really, really good. But massively overlooked for the most part. And two of the guys were actually looking to do multiple Spartan races next year, and both have got like season passes. And they were like, "Well, I'm planning to do this event here and here, and like planning to do a trifecta every weekend, which we know is like problematic because it's hard to train for three separate different distances in one weekend, and then equally." You take an absolute battering on the weekend, so you have to taper before, you have to taper afterwards. So there's 2 to 3 weeks where training's out of whack, and then also you're not going to get a fair assessment of where you're at because you're not going to go as hard as you would have because you've got fatigue in your legs. Then you're also risking injury on top of that. And then also if you're in the open wave, you're going to get held up by a bunch of people, so you're going to be out there longer as well. So it's going to be at more of a cost. So basically, what I was doing was saying, look, at the moment, like you are afraid, there is fear for you to step up and move into like the age group competitive categories. But I said, if we flip this on its head, instead of comparing yourself and going, well, I'm not going to do very well, and people will be thinking, why are you on the course? You're clogging it up. That's not the case. That's us looking at ourselves and trying to talk ourselves out of it so we remain in our comfort zone. But actually, the complete opposite of that, it's an immediate performance enhancer to put yourself in more of a competitive environment because there's only going to be a few people in that category, which means the course is clear, so you can run as hard as you want. So realistically, it's you versus you, although there's other people in your age group that are there. And equally, you're on that course and you're in this environment in which you can grow into. Like that becomes the floor, and then at the top of that is the people that are winning the age groups, and so you've got all of that growth to go into, and you're witnessing that. You're seeing how they run, how they race, how they tackle each obstacle, and even if you come bottom of the age group, you're still the top of the open heat. So we spoke about this before. Do you want to be the top of the bottom or work towards being the top of the bottom, or do you want to be like bottom of the top? And that's not to say that you would be bottom of the top, but by putting yourself in more of a competitive environment, it allows for so much more growth. So it's not like comparing yourself to each other from the standpoint of, oh, like this is going to be detrimental to my success. I'm going to be viewed upon like badly. I've got imposter syndrome, all this sort of stuff. Like what we do, like comparison can be a really, really good thing if you compare yourself to people that you want to become like and see how they're running and seeing how efficient they are. And it's like, oh, so I'm here. This is not what's working for me. But in order for me to bridge the gap and become better and become more like them, I can compare myself in a decent way to them rather than going, well, that gap's too big and I don't think I could bridge it. That's counterproductive. But we get inside our own head and we keep ourselves trapped because of the way that like we view the situation. It's really not that bad. So anyway, these guys are gonna not just do open heat, they're gonna step up for a number of races and actually experience age group. And it's like, boom, you've just skyrocketed your like trajectory. Like you're going to take yourself a lot further. So yeah, I think it's important. So I think just one more thing on the strength. It's kind of knowing what you should be doing versus actually what you're doing. Yeah. And often we can lift with the ego or try and get that extra rep in for the ego. And something we really like help people, guide people on is becoming more like in tune with their body from a day-to-day standpoint, but also with their training so that they know themselves. And it's also like having the education behind what is the risk versus the reward of actually getting that extra rep or extra set in. And I actually had an experience of this the other day when I was squatting. I was like, yeah, I feel pretty good, go into it. And then went down on, I think it was the third set of the squats and just felt my hamstring. Like nothing like badly like hurt or twinged or anything like that. But I was like, it's just a little bit of extra stress on that hamstring. Now, old Matt would have gone, all right, just rep it out. You've only got 4 more reps to do. You'll be all right. But new mat was like, nope, boom, put the bar back on the rack, set was done, and then move straight onto upper body. So it's like knowing the difference between like how much you can push mentally and physically what the body can handle in that moment. So being intuitive, but also being like flexible and adaptable to what happens and not going, well, I wanted to lift this here, but actually I didn't. But then when you've got all the data, it's like, okay, was there too much volume in that? Yeah, was there too much combined within that superset? Was there too much weight on the bar? Yeah, was, I don't know, some other variable, something else that got in the way? And then track that, make sure that that's logged. And then this week, when I go back into training, I'll see how I feel. And hopefully there's been some adaptation there.
Yeah, it's important. You can't just keep pushing for the sake of it because you don't know the damage that could be done, or what could affect you in later sessions.
I think it goes for racing as well. They're talking about like me being in Austria doing the beast. I booked on to do the sprint the next day, but I was like, fuck no, am I not doing that? Could I do it? Yeah, of course I could do it. Is it a good idea for me to do that? No. Like, but a lot of us just go, well, I booked onto the full trifecta, so I'm going to run that as hard as I can. And we've done that. Like, I think for the first 2 years that we raced, it was like every single weekend I'm going to do the beast, the super, and the sprint, and I'm going to go hard on all of them and see where I end up. Yeah, but yeah, you can take it, but it's like, well, what cost?
Like I think especially if you're wanting to compete to the next level as well, it's yeah, you're not gaining anything from it at all. You just you're not. It's better to just have specific races throughout the year to work towards and then to just complete that.
I think we do another episode on this as well because I think previously, we done like planning the season. So I think maybe next week we could do that because I've certainly been doing it with a number of the guys and focused a lot on it this weekend. And I think this will nicely feed into that as well. All right, so going back to training in the morning, preference, yeah, some of the time for you, for me. Like I said, I'm more of like the approach at the moment currently of ease into the day, ease out of the day. With that being said, though, I am actually doing all of my training for the most part in the evening, and that's just what is practical for me. But that's likely going to change in the next couple of weeks, and probably start to see those changes this week, just because it's dark and wet and miserable, and I don't want to be running on the hills in wet, windy weather where I've got the ability to roll an ankle or fall in some hole somewhere. But yeah, like also looking at like that dip in the middle of the day. And I certainly experienced that from time to time where it's like I've been sat at a computer for a while, been doing this, that, the other. I kind of just need a little bit of a breather and a break. So you could technically do a low intensity session there, whether it's like a run. It could even be simpler than that, like going for a walk, taking the dog for a walk, whatever that may be, just to get some midday sun or light at least to boost energy. And actually on this as well, I think in terms of like breakthroughs, like world records and like people setting like some serious like records, personal bests, they happen in the later part of the day. And looking at like temperature of the body, so core temperature like in the middle of the day is at its highest. So actually like we are physically primed to perform at that time of the day. However, what comes into play with that is a bit of a mental drop. So another thing we could add into this is like, well, when do you actually race? Like, do you race in the later part of the day, or do you actually race in the morning? So yeah, you can get breakthroughs in terms of performance in the later part of the day, but are you going to be racing at that time of the day? No. So it could be good for stroking your ego and saying, yeah, I set a 3K, 5K, 10K best effort at 2 p.m. on a particular day after taking consideration all of the other factors that come into that. Or actually, do you race at 7:30 in the morning every time you do a Spartan race? or any other time? So would it be better to train the body to perform at that time versus any other time of the day?
I think with the training as well, like train like you're at the event or like getting ready for the event. So for me, I'm not going to come do a strength session or a running session in trackies, a hoodie, t-shirt. Like I'm going to go as minimal as possible, like I would do for a race, because then it helps you psychologically get into that set, whether it's cold, wet, because you never know what to expect on a race day. So you can go into that run. Like, yeah, it may be shit to begin with because you've got to warm your body up to begin with. But it's the same with like a race. You have to get yourself like psyched up for it. Like a couple of weeks ago, I did a long run and it pissed it down. But I was in that mode of, right, this is how it could be in a race. Just fucking deal with it. Like if you can take this, then you can take what else is going to be thrown at you in a race. Because if you just train indoors, especially for OCR, if you're just training indoors all the time, you're not going to be as well primed to the harsh conditions. And one thing that I realized was Tartan Warrior, like even though it was sunny on the second day and it was like beginning of the season, some people struggled like with getting in the cold water and getting out, or being like shirtless essentially because of the cold and the wind. And if you can mentally prepare yourself for that, but also train like it and tackle it, you're going to give yourself a better chance, because it's like your ego's there and it knows, right, I can take on this harsh condition. So if it starts pissing it down, right, I've trained in it, right. So it's not nothing new. It's not a shock or surprise to the system.
Mm, mm. Yeah, definitely. And then you won't have moments like I did when we was going under the logs and dunking.
Fucking, I told you, spit, don't swallow.
What story are we on about here? Um, yeah, yeah. I think there's definitely something to be said for conditioning. Um, yeah, it's not just about like the physical training. It's like getting the body prepared for like being out in nature in the elements, and that's a big stressor in itself. Obviously, you don't want to expose yourself to too much cold or too much heat. But that particular weekend at Tartan War, it was freezing. I think you just turned up for the 8K on the second day, but I went out with Ricky Carino for just a bit of a fun lap on the 3K. And holy crap, my grip completely failed on that race because we were just in the wet, in the cold. And I don't even think there was too much of like a submersion on that. I think we did go for a bit of water. But yeah, like I just literally couldn't feel my forearms, and that was a big thing. So yeah, I think be prepared for that in like the later part of the year, to actually like do some training outside, rather than getting your grip really, really strong. And then when it comes down to it, you're exposed to the cold, and then yeah, there's like a significant drop in performance. I think Becky Neal was talking about something like this, or done like a study on it, to do with grip, and I can't remember how drastic the drop is in terms of like the percentage between like having warm grip, and then a few moments later or whenever it is having cold grip. I think it's something like significant, like a 15 or 20% drop in grip after 2 minutes of being exposed to the cold. Think about it in OCR, like you're going to be exposed to the cold for more than 2 minutes. And I know we've done cold plunges religiously for many years, all throughout the year. I done one yesterday. And Mila was there and she was like, "You're crazy." And I was like breath taken away, like, and it's not even that cold yet. But that's what happened to me at Tartan Warrior. We got in the water and I started dunking and it took my breath away completely. And then I inhaled the water, so I'm choking. And you're like, "Get under the logs, get under the logs," like pushing me through. And then I'm running along like retching. So yeah, it does help to have some conditioning, because even as conditioned as like I'd like to think we are, like it can still catch you off guard a little bit. And some of the things I'm doing at the moment is like cold dips. Like I said, not too often, maybe once or twice a week. I'll have like a couple of minutes in a cold plunge, and then the same for the sauna. Maybe 2 to 3 times a week have a sauna. So working on both, but then there's the hormonal benefits of that, but then also the immune system benefits, the detoxification benefits, as well as like it being mentally as well as physically challenging to hold yourself in that environment. But then that has a great crossover to training. Yeah, like you're in the sauna for the last couple of minutes, or you got that last 30 seconds on the cold plunge. You could cross that over to training when you're digging deep on like a VO2 max interval, or you're on the track, or you're doing threshold work and there's 5 minutes left on the clock. It's like, okay, I need to dig in. I need to kind of just remain present and focused on what I'm doing right now. And that's a really good tip, like presence and focus, kind of, yeah, taking yourself out of the moment, but also keeping yourself in there and like, yeah, absorbing the environment and breaking things down in such a way that where it's more manageable.
Yeah, that doesn't mean go cold plunge for an hour every day, but like just doing something that you could expect out of course is could be beneficial for your performance, but also your health. Like I hate cold plunges, probably the worst thing, and it's why I've added cold showers into this phase because I hate them. Like my inner bitch comes out all the time. Some people can just go in. Like it happened at Mallorca, even like when the sun was beaming in the morning, getting in, just a little fucking bitch. Like I hate I struggle with it. So for that mental challenge, it's good to do them. Once I'm in and I'm settled. But to begin with, like it's fight or flight. Like those signals start kicking in.
Yeah, I think it makes it a lot more challenging when you do have a low body fat percentage as well. Yeah, the cold hits you a lot quicker than if you have a little bit more body fat. So I think if you are like an athlete that does have a lower body fat percentage, there's something we adopted for day 2 of Tartamore. It was actually like having like neoprene sleeves on and actually having like gloves on to help with the cold, and even for like longer duration races. And me and Liam Murray were speaking about this yesterday, like I think they're either like the kayaking like mittens, so you can like pull the mitten off and expose your hand and then wrap them back up because they're going to get wet, but you want to keep them warm. And gloves aren't the best thing for grip. We've tried and tested numerous sets of gloves, and I think what it comes back to is actually bare skin on the bar on the rings is the most efficient. But if your grip has dropped 15-20%, maybe more than that because they're cold, then that's going to be the thing that makes your grip fail. So I think with everything we're saying so far, it's like minimal effective dose. What's the bare minimum you can do to achieve maximum results in the short term, as well as that allowing you to fit more in across the medium and long term as well. And then that comes with the consistency of everything that's into that. I think time of day is super important. What I would add on this is like trying to keep it to the same point of the day. So for me, where I'm at right now, I'm doing like low intensity stuff in the morning. Like I'll do a little bit of rope flow or go for a walk in the morning. Just been for a walk for about an hour this morning on the hills. Nothing too strenuous whatsoever. And then I'll probably go climbing later. So a little bit of grip, a little bit of low intensity training, but keeping that low intensity work to the same point a day where I'm just doing movement and then moving across the day. And then when I train at the moment, it's the evening time. So anywhere from like 6 or 7 p.m. is actually when I'm doing my training, whether that is strength training or whether that's an intense like training session, cardiovascular session, or something light, is at the same time of day every day. So I can get some regularity into it, settle into routine. But the thing that's going to change that is the weather, the time of year. And that is what works for me currently right now, because last year I was at points training twice a day, and I'll train in the AM, then I'll train in the PM. And actually that was affecting my like productivity, because I'd get into the swing of things and it'd be like, oh, well, I'm going to go and train. And then it would take a little bit of time to get back into it. So this is what's working for me very well at the moment. I feel I can get a lot more consistency with this, and then I can layer more on, versus like what a lot of us do is go, well, this is where I want to be, and this is the process that I need to apply to get there. So I'm going to start doing 2 or 3 training sessions a day, I'm going to try and do that 6 or 7 days a week. And already we're setting ourselves up for failure. And especially at this time of the year when we do have a little bit more time and freedom and flexibility to go, well, I'm not racing for the next 5 or 6 months. Do I really need to be jam packing all of my training in as if I'm still in peak season? So by the time I get to doing my first races next year, I've not really had any respite. I'm mentally and physically like tired and not all that motivated to peak and like perform at the top end come there. So it's like looking at everything and making sure that whatever you are doing now is consistent and achievable for the coming months and coming years in actual fact. So I think take home from this, and by all means add more on this, Mitch, as well, is like what is practical for you. Yeah. There are benefits to training in the middle part of the day, like cognitively, as well as like peak performance. But if you're working a 9 to 5 job, that might not be workable. So you might need to take a little walk in your lunch break and get some light then. And equally, you might not be able to work in the evenings because you've got the commute, travel, and you've got life, family commitments, lacking energy after a very stressful day. So training in the evening might not be the optimal thing. And then training in the morning might be the thing. But I think look at where you can be the most consistent and then aim to do that day in, day out, week in, week out, because that's going to be the thing that sees you through. And it's better to do something than nothing. So if you can't get up early and train, if you can't train in the middle of the day, if the only option is to train at the later part of the day, and in some people that do shift work in the middle of the night, then that's what you have to do to fit it in. And if you do fit it in, that will help you. But what we're saying is we want to balance the stress with the rest. We want to prioritize our health, our body composition, our lifestyle, our routine, and then use that as a platform to build upon to perform cognitively and physically.
Yeah, it's just seeing what works for you within your routine, but don't. I think a lot of people tend to slack off on the weekend because they've done Monday to Friday. It's like, oh, I'll train, but I'll do it when I want to on the weekend. Whereas if you can aim to keep the consistency there, like you're going to build a stronger habit over the long term, or over the duration of the time that you are training for something specific, whether it's in off season or still in race season as well.
Yeah.
Because not every day is going to be the same. Like I don't train at the same time every day. However, each week I train near enough the same time on that day. So like Mondays, I'll always train around 2, 3 o'clock. Tuesdays is first thing in the morning. Wednesdays is first thing and then on the evening. Thursdays, it's dependent. Same with Friday, because it depends what's on, if I've got classes to deliver or whatnot. And then Sunday is Saturday's recovery. Sunday is first thing in the morning to get it done because it's quite time consuming and there's other things to do. So it's what's going to be the best for you.
Yeah.
And then cut it short as well. Like if you're wanting to say get faster and you've just hit your strength sessions and you haven't been really hitting your running sessions, you need to cut those strength sessions down, not completely out, but work on the running side so you can build on that. Like that's just like myself saying, right, I want to build my leg strength, so I'm going to go run 20 kilometers 4 times a week. I'm going to get faster. Yes, I'll improve power to output with running, but I'm not necessarily going to fully build muscle just from running.
Yeah, good point. And like based on that, like the way you structure your week is very different to mine. I think you done your long run yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you done your long run yesterday, whereas I do my long run on a Wednesday. So it really goes back to like time availability on that. And typically many of us do our long runs on the weekend because we're not at work, which means we do have additional amount of time to spend, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours in some cases. If you're doing ultra, maybe a little bit more than that out on the hills. Whereas for me, that don't work because I'm on daddy daycare on the weekend, and often carrying my children on interval sessions because they don't want to be left behind, and they just enjoy it as well. So yeah, it's looking at not only structuring the day and allowing that to determine, based on all the factors we've spoken about when you train, have a look at the week, because doing a long run on a weekend, if that's what you're focusing on, if that's part of your OCR goals, do you need to do that on the weekend, or actually could you get up in the week and actually do that then? And like Wednesday seems to be like the optimal for me, because then I'm balancing the easy stuff, the intense stuff. I can go for my long run after I've done something intense, and then equally it's not going to put huge amounts of fatigue in my body for when I do my strength training on a Thursday. But the strength training is something that takes it out of my body, so I take a rest day or recovery day on a Friday when I'm typically traveling, and then Saturday and Sunday. Sunday in particular is normally a bigger day where I do 2 training sessions, probably a track or an uphill session in the morning, and then I'll do like an OCR threshold workout and some skill. There's a big training day, but then for the majority of the time, there's not really too much else on that's super hard hitting. So it's balancing that stress with the rest based on my routine and my availability. So I think that's the thing that allows us to answer what we do with our training and when we do it. Something we help our guys with is like calendar use and planning, and that's just from a day-to-day standpoint, making sure we're prioritizing self-care, self-love, make sure we got like work commitments when we eat, our training, time for loved ones, whether that's children, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever that may be, because it's essential. Like you can't build the foundations of training on top of lousy foundations. Like, and even with the best intentions and tons of motivation, like that won't survive, because we haven't like built like a routine out that can like change over time. But we need to have that basic structure, to then become consistent, to then build the habit, and then we can actually make some progress.
Yeah, looking at the intensity of the sessions as well, of how you like where you place them, you need that balance. Like your structure to where your sessions are is completely different to where mine is. Like, it's how my structure is throughout the week. Like I'll hit Monday is grip, Tuesday is a watt bike session, 30 minutes, and a lower body session, superset. So that's like an hour combined, 30 minutes lower body, 30 minutes watt bike. Wednesday is normally VO2 max. Thursday is normally full body. Friday is an easy run. Saturday recover. And then Sunday is a long run, depending on specific pace or what we're trying to hit. So there's so much difference there. And as you can see, there's not a lot of actual training in there. We're not training for 2 to 3 hours. It's just making sure that we can hit that specific training stimulus to keep us progressing, moving forward. Like it's all about those small steps instead of taking big leaps. Like big leaps, yes, in the long term may help, but to get to that big leap, like there's small steps that need to be taken before you can take a huge jump. You're on mute, mate.
Yeah. So I think that comes on to like intuitive training and like listening to the body as well. So obviously we talked a lot about like the bigger picture, the structure, what we kind of do on different days, but also looking at like the low intensity training, the high intensity training. We've said that we do a variety of different ones. I kind of like do low intensity for the majority of the day, then do my high intensity, whether that's like runs or strength training in the evening. That's practically what works for me right now. But there's also a way you can structure your training so that if you, like Mitch, you're doing them at similar times of the day, but also can be at different times of the day, you could technically get an extra 6 hours, 12 hours worth of recovery. So say, for instance, you do an AM session that's really intense, like Mitch said, for one of his intervals, and then the following day you're doing, I don't know, a strength training session, but you do that in the PM, like the evening. You've got well, basically not just 24 hours, you've got 36 hours worth of recovery between that by targeting at different times of the day as well. So that's something else that can be factored in to help with recovery. And it's not about how much we can fit in, but that's something that can be quite useful. But yeah, that comes with like intuition. So don't be like scared to move things around, because that's what keeps you in the game. And also the big thing that we've not mentioned, like if you don't feel primed to take on a particular session, like first thing you can do is swap that out to something more intense for easy. Or if you're still not feeling that, then you could just put that as an active recovery day or a rest day. But everything's got to be flexible, adaptable. Instead of looking at it like a 7-day training week or a 14-day cycle, look at it like based on how you feel on that particular day. And all of that comes back to what did you do in the last training session or the last few training sessions. And if you're not feeling primed to perform on today's training session, look at what you've done in the previous days and look at how you can like dial that back or optimize that so actually you can keep performing. And that goes back into like the minimal effective dose. But we just try and max out in absolutely everything. And then when it comes around to training, we're sore or we're fatigued and we're not feeling it like mentally as well as physically. So there's lots of considerations here, but and there's so much more we could talk about. But it's really, really important. This is what we do with our members on the team, is make sure that the plan is structured in a way that it fits into their routine. And guys, if you're listening, it's not ideally, speak to us and we'll do that even more so. But that's the thing that it just goes so far. Yeah, because yeah, we just need to make sure that we have things in the right place so we can show up, be consistent, continuously get the results, but be like intuitive, listen to your body, because that's the thing that's going to tell you how to perform. An example of this was this weekend. Done an interval session yesterday, and when I was warming up, I was still a little bit sore. But once I'd warmed up, like properly, my body was ready to go and perform and do some pretty fast intervals. So it's knowing yourself, it's knowing the difference between muscle fatigue, cardiovascular fatigue, or like nervous system like fatigue as well. And yes, there is a crossover, but you could be really, really sore, but your HRV could be really, really high, which means you can actually take on a big load. Just make sure that you're not going to risk it at the risk of injury and like damage some soft tissue or a joint or something. Cool. Anything else you feel like would be beneficial for us to go over in regards to this, Mitch?
Just like warming up like before the sessions. I think that's an important one because it's something that a lot of people neglect quite a lot or neglect quite a lot. And it's been known to cause injuries and it can actually like cost you like months of training essentially just from not spending 10 minutes. So like when you are factoring that time to train, whatever day it may be, like factor in another like 15 minutes, so like 10 minutes beforehand, just warming up, going through the motions, and then at the end, just calling off like 5 minute stretch off. Because if you don't, like if say we didn't warm up and we went to the track now and then started running 1 kilometer intervals at like 3:20 pace, I guarantee someone's gonna tear something. Or like you're gonna hurt yourself or you're not gonna maximize that session because your muscles haven't been primed, your joints haven't been lubricated essentially to handle such speed and intensity. And if you're struggling how to warm up or you don't know what to do, like there's a mnemonic that always sticks with me. And like I was taught it in the army when I did my PTI course. And to this day, like I found it's been very beneficial. And it's basically the mnemonic ramp. Okay. So it's raise your heart rate. So slowly but surely start getting that heart rate up, activate the muscles. So the muscles that you're going to be doing. So if you're going to be like lifting squats, doing body weight squats, lunges, calf raises, like activating those muscles that are going to be used. Mobilize. So mobilizing the joints, doing some dynamic mobility stretches, swinging the legs, like making sure they're lubricated, good to go, and then potentiate, which is doing the session. Like if you follow that for 10 minutes, you can't essentially go wrong because you've slowly but surely primed your body in all key areas to attack the session that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, really, really valuable. I mean, take notes on that, guys, and yeah, even like repeat that mnemonic to yourself so that you can drill that into yourself, and it doesn't take too long. It's a pretty much a modern issue because human beings, even like athletes like ourselves, we are relatively sedentary. Yeah, we do a lot of sitting throughout the day. I do a lot of driving, so I'm sitting for a couple of hours, 3 hours at a time, which isn't good for our bodies, but equally like standing up or doing repetitive movements can add to strains and pains. So we need to make sure that we're moving in a multitude of different ways all of the time. To put context on this, thinking from like an ancestral standpoint of like hunter-gatherer human being, like if you was on the savannah and all of a sudden you come across a predator and you had to sprint, you wasn't like, hang on a minute, dude, let me just do some dynamic stretching. Let me get my heart rate up a little bit. No, fuck no, you're going to sprint. You're going to sprint. You're going to go from 0 to 110% right away. And they wouldn't sustain Achilles injury or tear a hamstring or whatever else. A lot of it is because of the patterns of movement that human beings do now. Yeah, and that is how we should be as human beings. And WEC method talks a lot about this with all of like their rotational movement, and we apply a number of their techniques within the way that we personally train ourselves and help guide other people with. But like one of the coaches there is renowned for just picking up heavy weight, like ridiculously heavy weight, and shifting it from being in a cold state, something like 3 times, 4 times body weight. And he just says, well, like I move my body all of the time. My body is primed to take this on. So there was like a car accident or something like that, I could rip a door open. Like the body is primed, but the problem is human beings aren't like optimized like that anymore. So we do need to warm up. And not only for those reasons and telling that little bit of a story, one, if you warm your body up, you elevate the heart rate, you lubricate the joints, you raise the core temperature, you increase the muscles temperature, you will perform better. Yeah, you will perform better. Like we've all been there where you've just started a race and you run stupidly fast and then you gas and you blow up versus going and taking 10, 15, 20 minutes to elevate the heart rate. You perform better, but not only perform better, you prevent injury on top of that. So that's what you want to be looking at. And the way I look at it with my warm up is like I'm actually getting more reps in, I'm actually getting more training in. And that's the thing that will accrue over time. So yeah, I think it's a really, really important point, but it's easy to overlook. And even like cooling down as well. That's a big one that can be overlooked as well. But really what we're looking to do with all of this is optimize the lifestyle, like minimize the stress so that we can be energized mentally and physically and get our body in a really, really good place. So we're working on that power to weight ratio. We've got a decent amount of muscle, we're strong. We're also like physically fit. We've got like the endurance, but also we've got the flexibility and mobility to go with that. And a lot of that comes down to making sure that you are training consistently at the right times of day, what's practical for you, but then also like metabolically as well. Like the ease into the day, ease out of the day is very, very good for our bodies because when we wake up after an overnight fast, like we are in more of a fat burning state. Now you could elongate the benefits of that fat burning state with 1, nutrition, 2, fasting, and 3, how you train on that particular morning, but then also what you do in terms of like your dietary choices after that. Like if you wake up and slam sugar and then go and do a really, really intense training session, then eat more sugar, well, you're going to fill the tank, empty the tank, then refill the tank and kick yourself out of this fat burning state versus like Mitch was talking about with his Sunday, woke up, done a long run, completely fasted, and he's able to do that because he's metabolically flexible, meaning he can tap into his stored energy very, very efficiently. He doesn't necessarily need to slam a load of carbohydrates or a load of food afterwards, he could technically wait a period of time and feel good for it and perform, and it's a healthy thing to do. So he's getting into a deeper fat burning state, which is in line with his body composition goals and keeping him lean. It's also good for his adaptation of fat burning, which is what he was doing during this particular training session. And also it's a healthy thing as well, because it's helping his body get into a deeper state of autophagy, which is cellular cleansing and repair. So it's like, I'm winning here with my health, I'm winning here with my training, I'm winning here with my metabolism, and I'm feeling good and feeling strong. And now I'm going to reward myself with a very nourishing meal on top of that. So
Yeah, McDonald's.
Swung by McDonald's as well. I had a funny story actually. I was saved by Ronald McDonald when I turned up in New York City the other week. Did I tell you this story?
No.
So I landed in New York City. Landed at JFK at about, I don't know, like maybe 11 o'clock at night Eastern time. And my phone was working when I was in the airport. I was on the Wi-Fi, but basically I didn't have like the US data on my phone. on part of T-Mobile. So it has like Euro packs and UK packs and extenders. But it had like a spend cap on like international ones. So within like a matter of minutes, I'd gone over the spend cap and couldn't use my phone in the US. So as soon as I left the airport to go to the car hire place, I had no signal. So I was freestyling it. I felt, yeah, pretty lost about my phone, especially not knowing my way around that airport. Anyway, get to the car hire place, and I need to navigate out of the city and had no clue how to. And there was no Wi-Fi anywhere. And I'm sat here with this car. I was like, well, I better just start driving. So I start driving around, trying to find pickup signs and wherever I got to go. And bearing in mind, I had a 3-hour drive like north, and I'm oblivious to where I am and how to get anywhere. So I'm driving around and ended up stopping at these traffic lights. And I was like, fuck it, I'll just try and get on the Wi-Fi quickly, see if there's any Wi-Fi that I can pick up. And it was like, McDonald's. And I turned to my left, the golden arches are there, managed to get on the Wi-Fi, get on the sat nav, and off I went. I was saved by Ronald McDonald. If it weren't for him. So there is some good in the world. Like we can make use of McDonald's.
Just not the fucking food.
So, yeah. Yeah, I think that's about it. Guys, if you've taken some value, let us know. Also open this up to questions as well over on the podcast platforms. Also put this on social media as well. So if you've got any questions, want us to get more specific on any particular areas, let us know. And yeah, I think that's about it. If there's anything in particular you want us to dive deeper on, we can do that as well. But I think in the next week or two, we'll endeavour to do planning the season podcast as well, because we're into our off seasons now. I know some people have still got races all the way through till November, December in some cases, which doesn't leave much time for an off season. So we'll talk about that as well. So yeah, look forward to that. Is there anything final you feel like we should dive into before we wrap up today?
I think everything's been covered. We've covered warming up, cooling down, specific sessions, time of day to train, like how it can affect your performance, like doing too much. Yeah, everything's been covered.
Yeah. I think the thing I'll wrap up on is saying, guys, you don't need the most fancy, frilly, fashionable training approach. You don't always need something new. It just comes down to like doing the work, but doing the work in an appropriate dose and not overcompensating if you miss sessions by trying to cram things in, because that will lead to overreaching, overtraining, and the possibility of becoming injured. All right. So always look at doing the bare minimum for maximum results, aim to be consistent. And often that comes down to doing the same thing. Mitch has been doing like 1K intervals, the same session for ages. I intend to make sure that he does that for probably the next 2 years. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, same training session for 12 years. He'll probably do that for another 5-6 years. Yeah, so we don't need the new, we don't need the fancy, we don't need the fashionable. We need to do the work. We need to do it consistently. And there's so many variables even within one training session that you can do even before you change the particular approach. yeah, and we can go into that another time. All right, but sweet. I think we'll wrap it up.
Sweet. Simplicity is key. Like if you keep it simple with everything that you do, you'll find that you'll have a lot more balance and you'll go a lot further.
Yeah, boring, I know, to receive that and hear that, and then even harder to actually apply it. But yeah, too much complexity. Yeah, it just throws a spanner in the works and actually slows us down. Cool.
Sweet.
All right, Mitch. Good to chat, man. Hope you guys took some value, and we'll chat to you soon.
All right. See you later. Look after yourself.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, then we'll greatly appreciate a rating and a review so we can help find more people like you. Also, sharing this episode on your social media channels will help us reach more people so that we can provide them with the same knowledge, race strategies, the tactics to allow us all to succeed in both life as well as competition. Also, if you'd like to dive deeper and learn more about how we can support you on your journey, then head over to Instagram or Facebook and send me a direct message. Alternatively, you can visit livingprimal.co.uk for more information about our services. Catch you next time.